With your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Thursday, December 22nd, 2016. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Sure, happy it's Thursday. Getting on down to Christmas if you haven't done your shopping yet. Boy, it's starting to get a little jammed down there. And we have a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials and keeping us out of trouble. And a reminder that the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in our live broadcast tomorrow in hour number 3. Now then, despite all of the media bashing and the liberologists whining and this whole entrenched establishment out there trying to discredit Donald Trump even before he takes office, his approval ratings have gone up 12 points since October. And it's just another reminder that the establishment and the corporate media have lost control of the minds of America. We're breaking free. Now, we've been talking about Donald Trump's private security and how Robert Reich went on out there and said, well, private security is tantamount to tyranny and he should just, trust himself to the Secret Service here. And that would be rather ridiculous. Again, we all know the Secret Service stood down for the assassination of John F. Kennedy. We know that Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her protective detail. And now we're hearing that Donald Trump has actually hired a Russian security company for his private security in order to minimize the possibilities of conflicts coming from within the U.S. establishment. And he is right to do that because it turns out this policeman who shot and killed the Russian ambassador had been on Erdogan's own security detail as well. So it's legitimate. This is another reason for Trump to have private security. He's going into the Oval Office with as much of the establishment opposed to him as John F. Kennedy did. Now, remember when Michael Moore was out there saying, don't worry, I'll pay your fines and everything if you vote your conscience. And as it turned out, the electors did vote their conscience. 7 of them refused to vote for Hillary Clinton. That's an all-time record. But as it turns out, Michael Moore's offer of a bribe to electors to switch their votes is a felony violation of 52 U.S. Code Section 10307C. It's punishable with up to 5 years in prison or a $10,000 fine. So we're going to miss you, Michael. There were some of your movies I really, really liked. Canadian Bacon is still one of my favorites. Now, one of Roger Stone's operatives has infiltrated this group that is planning a massive disruption for the inauguration. And Stone is sending out the alarm to Trump's protective detail, the Secret Service, and the Washington, D.C. police that these people are literally organizing for mass violence in Washington, D.C. between January 14th up to the 20th. They're going to try and literally paralyze the city. And I think part of the agenda there is so that photos of the crowd at Trump's inauguration look small compared to the giant crowd they had assembled for Obama's inauguration. It's all about ego and vanity is what's going on here on the part of our outgoing president here. And there's an article over in Investment Watch blog that is saying essentially the same thing that I am. The next month until Trump is sworn in are the most dangerous because Obama is ramming through presidential pardons, mostly for drug criminals, passing tons of new executive orders. Everybody with an agenda that's threatened by Trump is trying to cement it into place before he can take office and pull the plug on it, to mix my metaphors. The war party is out to start a war. The immigration and refugee people are out there trying to shove as many bodies across those borders as they can. Now, a lot of people are looking at outgoing President Obama, and they're talking about what exactly his legacy is going to be. He's certainly the first Nobel Peace Prize winner to bomb 7 countries after winning the Peace Prize. I'm not sure if that's considered a plus or a negative. As presidential legacies go. But one item that will definitely be on his legacy, as illustrated by the current fight between the corporate media and the independent media, is the fact that Obama bought into this elitist idea that the American people should be ruled by propaganda, not informed by facts. They understood they couldn't persuade America into what the liberologists wanted, the war hawks wanted, so they had to trick us, and that's what they did. And now we've called them on it, and it's created a crisis in the corporate media. They're all over there crying and playing with their puppies and kittens and eating the Play-Doh. Now, interestingly enough, there is a mass exodus of foreign policy staffers currently in the White House that are getting ready to leave. Now, I'm sure some of them understand that they're going to be replaced anyway under Trump, but overall, it feels like the neocons are jumping ship because they understand they're not going to be able to push their agenda inside the Trump administration. And they're looking to find places where they can continue to push their agenda from outside. Now, we're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And the good news is Hillary Clinton's donors now want an investigation into just how she managed to spend $1.5 billion in campaign donations and still lose the election. And obviously, because of all the crime and corruption of the Clintons' history and the Clinton Foundation, some of these donors are wondering if maybe some of their donations didn't actually go to the campaign but went into certain pockets. And now they're asking for a campaign autopsy to find out just where it all went. They want an auditing of where this money went. And that is problematic for the Clintons if it turns out some of that money went out to hire hackers to attack the servers of independent media websites as one possibility. But her donors want the receipts now. They want to see where that money went. This is going to get really good. But it signals something else. With Hillary making noises about a run in 2020, where's she going to get the money for it? She exhausted her current donors this election cycle. In 4 years, they're not going to come up with another $1.5 billion to give her. It's just not going to happen, especially with that cooling of the ardor that she lost. The 2016 election was significant because it signaled an end to the old wisdom that whatever candidate has the most money wins the election. It didn't work this time. Hillary spent more than twice what Donald Trump did and still lost, even with all the fraud. Now, interestingly enough, according to a USA Today Suffolk University poll, right now 62% of Democrats and independents don't want Clinton to run again. They got burned out on the Empress Hillary. They're not interested. So already it's looking like 2020, assuming Hillary's health holds up, is going to be problematic for her. Now, turning over to the media, Bill Mitchell is out there expressing his gratitude to the corporate media and to Facebook and to everyone else trying to censor the news for driving the American people hungry for truth to the independent media. And that's exactly what's been going on. It's called the Banned in Boston effect. And if you're not exactly sure what I'm talking about, it harkens back to the days of stage theater plays, even before TV and movies came along, where people would put on theater productions, and if it did well, they would tour to other cities. And they discovered early on that if your production was banned in Boston because it violated the prudish moral code of Boston, that would actually be good for your box office in the rest of the country. People would want to go and see what all the fuss was about. And the same thing is happening today. Ever since the Washington Post put out that list of websites that were arms of Russian intelligence, the readership numbers have been going through the roof. The American people know the corporate media establishment has been lying to them all along. They are, in fact, hungry for the truth, and they're looking for other sources that they can rely on to tell them the facts about what's going on so that they can evaluate and think for themselves and make good decisions in the spirit of Thomas Jefferson. Now, there's another article out here over at stevepeisnick.com declaring the corporate media to be dead. I'm not sure we're ready to write the obituary, but he's basically out there saying the U.S. government has this nasty addiction of compulsive lying over and over and over again, and the official mouthpiece for this lying government is not the press secretary at the White House or the press spokesman at the Pentagon or the State Department. It's CNN, MSNBC, ABC, NBC, Fox News, Comcast, and now Facebook and Twitter. And everybody sees that's what's going on. And again, there is a strong parallel to the history of the Soviet Union leading up to its collapse, where the Soviet people came to understand that Pravda and Izvestia were lying to them, and they started looking for an alternative, and they set up this ad hoc network of fax machines called the Samizdat, where ordinary citizens started writing about what they saw, what they knew, and just sending it all across the Soviet Union on these fax machines. Put the article into the fax machine. It already had 10 numbers set up in the memory. You push the button, it would go to those 10 fax machines. Each of those would then forward it on to another 10, 10 times 10 times 10 times 10. It didn't take a long time for that article to be all over the Soviet Union. And the Soviet Union tried to shut it down, just like our government's trying to shut down the independent media. And in the long run, it didn't work, and the Soviet Union collapsed. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Do you have any update on John from Barbados' health condition?
No, I've got a ton of email that has come on in expressing their best wishes. I did send an email to his direct email address, which has gone unanswered. I have no update at all regarding his condition. We're just waiting to find out.
Okay. Mike, quickly on our friend from Poland, one of the callers from Poland called yesterday, and I don't think we can discount the stories of a color revolution in Poland, because although the government in Warsaw is sufficiently Russophobic, they're not sufficiently adhering to the New World Order agenda with regard to the refugees.
I got a lot of emails expressing the same sentiment. And reminding us all that when the U.S. tried to overthrow Erdogan and Turkey were supposed to be U.S. allies. They just weren't allied enough. And, of course, they botched that, which is what's triggered this Turkish pivot toward Russia. But I got a few emails saying that it's too soon to say that there isn't a covert U.S. effort at regime change in Poland.
Absolutely. I mean, Poland and Hungary, they stand out. Orban, his government as well, has been opposing this whole refugee agenda. So it's still a possibility. On the Russian sanctions, the EU extended the sanctions to July 2017. Talking to my Russian friends, they're pleased about that. They feel like this is good news. I mean, they can do without French cheese. They really don't care. They're looking at the long-term economic prospects of the country, especially with regard to manufacturing, which was gutted by Yeltsin and the Harvard boys in the 90s,
yes,
and agriculture. So they're very pleased about this. They hope these sanctions go on indefinitely.
Well, I mean, certainly Russia has taken this opportunity to start becoming more independent and self-sufficient, and that, of course, is directly contrary to the goals of the New World Order, who wanted all agriculture to be concentrated on this part of the globe and all manufacturing concentrated on this other, to keep us dependent on other parts of the globe, to keep us enslaved to this New World Order. The last thing they want are nations saying, you know something, we can manufacture our own goods, we can grow our own food, you know, and yes, we'll trade across the border, but not as a dependency situation.
Yeah. You know, my last topic was the attack in Berlin at the Christmas market. You know, I keep thinking about it. If it was orchestrated by the New World Order, these elites, it doesn't make sense, because this attack directly injures and potentially fatally hurt Angela Merkel's chances for re-election. So why would they do that?
That's a real question here. That's the real question here, and the other issue, there does seem to be some indication that this was a false flag and there's a cover-up, but finding out what the motive for it was, certainly that one attack by itself makes Merkel look bad. But if it's the first in a coming flood of attacks all over the world, then Merkel is kind of off the hook. And we're already getting this usual seasonal warning that ISIS has released a list of churches they're going to attack in the United States over the Christmas holiday. So don't even feel that holiday cheer. You must stay afraid and under control.
Yeah, because Merkel's their point person in Germany. Because I just sent you an article, in fact, about France. How I think whoever gets into power in France is going to be against continuing the sanctions against Russia, continuing to isolate Russia. So they're going to lose their ally in Paris. So they need Merkel now more than ever.
Well, maybe not, because even if by some miracle Merkel is able to win re-election through the graces of Diebold electronic voting machines, and if Merkel hires up all those suddenly out-of-work vote riggers from the Hillary Clinton campaign, she's going to be paralyzed and ineffective because the German people are opposed to her. And one possible motive for the Berlin attack is to force her out now in order to replace her with somebody that the German people will sort of give a clean slate to and say, okay, let's start over, and where are we going? And whoever replaces Merkel is still firmly on board with the New World Order agenda. And that might be one possible motive right there.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot here. We're going to let you go. Now, as you know, Facebook is out there. They're going to censor fake news on the basis of these independent, objective third parties. And, of course, everybody's already pointed out these independent third parties are all extreme liberal organizations. They are not shy about imposing their liberal bias on everything. But one of them is Snopes, which promotes itself as a fact-checker gatekeeper on the Internet, although they have been exposed before for promoting the official government line on various stories, even in contravention of actual hard facts. Well, Snopes' reputation is taking a major hit because it's being reported over in the Daily Mail in Great Britain as the result of a very nasty divorce. Some of the inner secrets of Snopes are now being made public. And apparently, the co-founder is now accused of embezzling something like tens of thousands of dollars from Snopes' funds and spending it on prostitutes. And apparently, one of the fact-checkers employed by Snopes is a former porn star and current call girl who calls herself Vice Vixen. And she has a little sideline with her own little adult web page. And this is the best that the corporate media can come up with as respectable, objective fact-checkers. I mean, it's amazing. Now, the Russia bashing is still going on. And the newest one, CBS News was leading with this one this morning. Russia hacks into the Ukraine power grid and brings the power down. It's a sign of things to come for the United States. Russia's going to come on in here. And basically they're taking one of the numerous blackouts that Ukraine is suffering under and saying, oh, Russia did it, Russia did it, Russia did it. Now, Ukraine's infrastructure is crumbling because of the ruined economy, neglect by Poroshenko, and the results of the war. But CBS, on the basis of nothing but the word of Ukraine, is saying, yes, Russia hackers took down the power grid. The only problem with that is the computer systems that control power stations and other infrastructure are air-gapped because of those security concerns. They are not connected to the public Internet. When they wanted to put Stuxnet into the Iranian computers, it had to be carried in on a flash drive. So this idea that Russia is hacking into Ukraine's power system and causing blackouts is nonsense. It's just more of this hysterical Russia bashing. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about this constant Russia bashing coming out of the government and the media, and it's getting ridiculous. People are making fun of it online, which they should. That's the best way to deal with propaganda. And remember when students used to tell the teachers the dog ate their homework? Oh, well, now the Russian hackers deleted my homework. And honest officer, the Russians made me drink all that vodka, and that's why you had to pull me over here. And the officer says, well, actually, surprisingly, you passed the breathalyzer test, and those Russians, they're watering down the vodka. So, now, up in New England, the New England Patriots former player, Aaron Hernandez, has been in some legal troubles, been in jail, and his lawyer, as part of thrashing around trying to get the best deal for him, is now seriously suggesting Russian hackers were behind the leaking of this guy's jailhouse phone calls. It's all the Russian hackers, Your Honor. Absolutely. Oh, well, if it's the Russian hackers, then it simply must be true. It really is silly. There's a graphic making its way around the internet about two guilty-looking dogs saying the Russians pooed in the hallway. And that really is just how ridiculous this is getting. You know, the Russians made me leave my keys in the car. The Russians are responsible for the ants in the kitchen, and so forth and so on. Now, turning to the war zones, Syria and Russia are working with a new reconciliation agreement, and so far they have had 1,074 of the Syrian settlements sign on to this. So things are coming to a close in Syria from the U.S. military point of view, U.S. political point of view. This is the worst defeat since Vietnam. I think for ordinary people, even here in America, this regime change nonsense has gone on long enough. It's time for it to stop. And yet we're hearing there's a bipartisan group in Washington, D.C. that is going to urge Donald Trump to abandon his no more interventions policy. And in fact, we need twice as many as we had before. Now, the Western media is still trying to sell the idea that the Syrian people are just traumatized, that Assad has them under their control, and they're going to be suffering and tortured, and he's going to throw them into wood chippers and the rest of it. What's coming out from Syria itself, from people on the ground, photos and videos, they're happy. And there are more pictures of Syrian students celebrating the Aleppo victory. We had a video the other day about how the Christmas celebrations are underway. It was marred by an attempt to bomb the Christmas tree. And gee, I wonder who would do a nasty thing like that. Now, over the weekend, there was a bit of a stink where some 24 officers, intelligence officers of foreign countries were caught by the Syrian army inside Aleppo, including an American, an Israeli, and the rest are scattered out all over places, Turkey. And for some reason, this triggered a closed-door UN Security Council meeting. Well, it turns out, according to a story that came out of Novorossiya, it was actually far worse, and in point of fact, according to Novorossiya, 230 U.S. Army instructors, 54 British troops, 8 French, and 2 Dutch artillery specialists were caught in Aleppo working with the ISIS jihadists. And the Americans asked the Russian Foreign Minister, Lavrov, to keep this quiet for honest reasons, and in order to not escalate the situation. So far, they're keeping it low, except, of course, it is being reported in the Russian media. Now, the U.S. Army's commander in Europe is trying to ramp up how everything that Syria and Russia did in Syria was a bad thing. Russia just used Syria as live fire training. The complete disregard for this. Well, what about all those U.S. bombing missions that were supposed to be going after ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and they hit food storage areas, water processing plants, petroleum infrastructure? They kept missing ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Whoops. Anyway, got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, the Russia bashing is not confined to the United States. Over in Great Britain, a senior British Foreign Office official is describing Russia as a very malign influence and how they made things worse in Syria by interfering. Well, they didn't interfere. Syria asked Russia to come on in and help them deal with these terrorists. And the terrorists are now known to have been supported by the West as part of their effort at regime change. And they have failed miserably, which is why the emphasis now shifting back up to Ukraine. We'll get a war going with Russia and Ukraine. Somewhere, anywhere, I don't care. We need a war, and I don't care who with. Now then, getting on back to real news versus fake news. As you know, during the assault on Aleppo, a lot of corporate media were carrying these reports from reporters supposedly on the ground in Aleppo, bidding their last message. We don't know if we're going to survive. One of them, Bilal Abdul Karim, was out there with a video saying, I know I'm going to die tonight. Well, he just released a new video of himself posing with one of the jihadis, armed with a Kalashnikov rifle, and wearing a suicide vest. It's just all phony and fake coming on out. Now, Canada is finally admitting that weapons they sold to Riyadh may have been used in Yemen. And it's caused a bit of a ruckus because Ottawa is now being sued by Daniel Turp, who's a professor at the University of Montreal, claiming that Canada's export weapons deal with Saudi Arabia is assisting with its involvement in Yemen. And Canada is contending that the authority to decide what constitutes a legal weapons sale does not lie with the court, but with the Foreign Affairs Minister, Stéphane Dion. Basically, we'll sell weapons to whoever we want. And for you Canadians, you got to be looking at the fact that your government is just as complicit with the horrors being visited on the people of Yemen as the U.S. government. And all because the people of Yemen did not want to live under foreign puppet rule. Not too surprisingly, the propaganda on Iran is starting to crank on up. They're talking about more sanctions and how Iran is just a threat and Iran is this and they're doing that and all these really bad things. And all of it about as accurate as what we're hearing coming out of Syria. But the reality is Iran is not a nuclear cheater. They have complied with every requirement of the P5+1 agreement. The United States has not. They have not unfrozen Iran's money locked in the American financial system, and now they're throwing even more sanctions onto Iran. And the U.S. position is, well, they've complied with the P5+1, but they're still being defiant to us. Like there's a law against other nations being defiant. But the reality is, it is the United States that has repeatedly violated the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. In particular, by denying Iran the right to build peaceful nuclear applications. Power stations. That was the issue. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty includes a provision saying that nuclear nations are obligated to go into other member nations and assist them to build peaceful nuclear facilities. And if the real issue had been that Iran might be building a secret bomb factory under their power station, the way Israel did down in Dimona, going on in and helping them pour the foundations and lay the steel work and do the wiring and the plumbing is a great way to make sure that it is just a power station. And remember, Israel has played this game before. They justified the bombing of the Osirak power station up in Iraq by saying, we have solid intelligence, there's a secret bomb factory underneath that power station, like the one that the conspiracy theorists say we have under Dimona. And, of course, following the invasion of Iraq, international experts examined the ruins of the Osirak power station, and all they found was a power station. So the war hawks want a war. Russia, Iran, they want to complete that agenda that Wesley Clark exposed of conquering all the world's resource-rich areas and shackling them to the U.S. dollar to keep up foreign demand for U.S. dollars. Because that's the only thing other governments, other nations want dollars for. If you take a U.S. dollar in another country and you come to the United States, what can you buy with it? Overpriced junk or GMO agriculture. That's a kind of a raw deal there. And they're desperate to keep this petrodollar deal going because without it, foreign demand for the U.S. dollar will evaporate and it will lose its position as the leading global banking trade currency. It's already lost its monopoly on that. And now it's going to lose the whole thing. And that's why they're still out there talking about war on Russia. We have to destroy the ruble. We have to destroy the yuan. And we don't care how many millions of your kids have to die to do it. That Federal Reserve note is the most important thing in America today. And it's worth every sacrifice we make you make. Getting on back to the F-35, boy, if it isn't one thing, it's another. And apparently it turns out they've investigated the cause why one of these F-35s exploded on takeoff. And it turns out there was a loose bracket inside the weapons bay that allowed wiring to basically flip up against the frame and abrade. They had the same problem with the F-16. And apparently this bracket issue is already known about, but they're not able to get the updated replacement brackets manufactured fast enough to get them into all the planes. And do you know if the U.S. government took that $1.45 trillion that they're pouring into the F-35 program, they could write off every penny of that crippling student loan debt and have plenty of cash left over to buy a new water system for Flint, Michigan. There's an old adage in marketing that the real measure of what the customers want is what they're going to spend money on. And they may say, oh, I'm this and I'm that, but what they're actually buying, that's what they really want. I remember there was this wonderful story about this hotel where there was one of these big TV ministry conventions. And all these fine, upstanding, moral clergy showed up for the convention, and after it was all over, the hotel released the fact that they had set a record for rental porn while this group was there. So they can say one thing about we're moral and clean living, but what they spent their money on tells you what they're really all about. The same thing applies to the U.S. government. It doesn't matter if they say they're caring about ordinary Americans or they're concerned about this or concerned about that. Look where they spend the money. And that tells you what they really want. And it's not care of our veterans. It's not the repairs of our school. It's not about the repairs of our infrastructure. It's not about clean water or healthy food or safe pharmaceuticals. It's about war. And it's very, very telling. Now, Vladimir Putin and his experts have been looking at what's been going on with the U.S. military-industrial complex, the F-35, the F-22, the Independence and Freedom class littoral combat ships, the Gerald R. Ford. They're now admitting that may never be usable in combat. And now they're the same decision about the Zumwalt, the so-called stealth destroyer, which turns out it's not stealthy. Its air defense capabilities are inferior to the current Arleigh Burke class. And it's got power drive problems on top of that. Plus, because of that inverted bow, it's very unstable in a beam C. And Putin is now saying that as far as he can tell, Russia's military is now the strongest on earth. Because it works. The parts don't fall off when they try and use it. Now, remember when I was saying that the people of Europe, not the leadership, not the government, the people of Europe are opposed to a new world war because they know it's going to be fought on their front lawns. And for the people of Europe, the world wars are still current events because you can see the scars all around you. We don't have that in the U.S. The last military battles that took place in the United States were in the Civil War, and they've all been erased except for a few preserved highly manicured battlefields and monuments that make it all look very squeaky clean and, something to celebrate. But it's very present there in Europe. In France, you can still see the remains of those trenches from trench warfare. When I was working in Europe back in the 1980s, there were still places where they were still rebuilding from World War II. There were sections in the city that were just walled off. You couldn't go in because there were unexploded bombs there, and they were just going to let them sit until they go off and not allow any building in there. And now today we're finding out in the city of Augsburg, construction crews found an unexploded 3.8-ton air bomb in the ground. And they're having to basically evacuate 50,000 people. And on Christmas Day, when they assume everybody's going to be away with family and everything, they're going to try and defuse this thing. And that's what I mean when I say the people of Europe, world wars are a current event. They keep finding these things. I wish them the best. If that thing goes off, it's going to cause a huge amount of damage here. So let's turn to the economic news here. And we're looking at the situation in Italy, where they were turned down by ECB, IMF, World Bank. They were turned down by their own anchor investors, as very obviously this is going to be throwing good money after bad. We might as well flush it down the toilet for all that we're going to get for it. Italy is now going to nationalize the banks, and the only way they're going to be able to do that is to raise their debt limit, which means ultimately the Italian people are made to pay for all of this mess. And Italy proves banks are not the risk-free fantasy that you have all been taught in school. Banks do fail. That's why they have to be regulated so they don't get off and get into some reckless behavior. But behind it all is that lie of the private central bank that issues all the public currency as a loan at interest, trapping the nation and its people in hopelessly unpayable debt to make them slaves. They've been playing this scam on the human race for 300 years. That's long enough. It may all come crashing down together at the same time because of globalism. And we should seize that opportunity to stand up. And just as we said no to Hillary, we say no more private central banks. None whatsoever. Now, the U.S. has launched a lawsuit against Barclays for fraud over the mortgage securities. If you're starting to get the idea that all those people on Wall Street are criminals, it's not unrealistic when you look at all of these bankers, hedge fund managers that are being charged with rigging this and cheating that and overbilling there. There was a magazine did a survey of Wall Street. It was about 2 years ago, I think. And 25% of the people working on Wall Street that were interviewed were honest enough to say, yes, we commit fraud. We couldn't stay in business if we weren't committing fraud. And I imagine the actual number would have been higher. There's a group that's committing fraud, but they don't want to admit it to a magazine. But 25% did, said, yeah, we have to. We're not going to be in business without committing fraud. And that is apparently accepted behavior on Wall Street. And that Wall Street behavior is apparently acceptable, or has been acceptable, to the last several presidential administrations. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Karen in Maryland, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi there. You're open-minded enough to address this. Considering that the U.S. has not had a declared war in quite some time, that Congress declares war and the declarations of war are on the U.S. Senate's website, what is, to your knowledge, the definition of a veteran, since there has not been a declared war by Congress in quite some time?
Well, technically a veteran is anybody who has served in the military, even in peacetime. If they've served in a declared war, then they're considered a combat veteran, but they're still a veteran. And regardless of whether there's a declared war or not, if these people are going on out invading other countries and the people in those invaded countries, shoot at them, we have a moral obligation to care for these people. And I'm really not interested in legal mishmash or straining at gnats. These kids put on the uniform. They took the oath. Yes, they were misused by our government, but that's not their fault. These were men and women of honor who went and did the best they could in a horrible situation they were dropped into, and they have been grievously wounded, and somebody's got to take care of them. And it should be the U.S. government which profited from all of this military action. And instead, we're seeing the VA basically just put them into a holding pattern and hope they're just going to die so they don't, they can take the money and buy new artwork for the front of their buildings.
Okay, well, I mean, it should not be ignored that, you know, in the Constitution there is authority for Congress to declare war, and, you know, that's, you know, when the military should be sent, you know, overseas when there are declared wars. Now, I mean, I think that the allowances for the Navy are to be overseas anyway. I think that they're allowed to be in foreign waters. I mean, there's a definition of what the Navy is allowed to do, including being in foreign water, I believe. But, okay, I was just, because, I mean, my position is that the military should only be overseas when there's a declared war, so.
Well, we understand that would be the theory, but the reality is that the United States is having to garrison the world the way Imperial Rome had to garrison its empire to keep everybody scared and afraid to try and break away. And that's why we have something like 700-800 military bases around the world, and our kids and military hardware just spread all over the globe. We're just trying to maintain that empire. And, Karen, we're coming up on a commercial break. I'm going to put you on hold. I don't want you to hang up the phone because I want to come back and talk about this a little bit more, okay? All right, so we'll be back after these few words. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're talking with Karen and Marilyn. We're talking about U.S. power projection all across the globe. And I want to step back about your comment about Congress having the power to declare war, which is what the Constitution says. Now, under the War Powers Act, the President, acting in an emergency, can send military forces to deal with a crisis. That dates back to a time when speed of communication wasn't all that good, and getting the Congress together to vote a declaration of war might take some time, during which the crisis had to be resolved. In this day of instantaneous global communication, that's a little bit moot. But there was actually a lawsuit on this very issue. When George Bush went into Iraq, there was a lawsuit filed, Sullivan versus United States, seeking the courts to end the war in Iraq because there had been no congressional declaration of war. And the judge basically came on out, and his entire excuse was, well, there are things that aren't really the law, but we all just sort of go along with it. And so we're just going to go along with George Bush having the authority to start a war all on his own. And ironically enough, the judge, James C. Fox in this case, used as his precedent the 16th Amendment, saying that even though it wasn't actually ratified, we all just sort of go along with this idea that it's part of the law now, which shows you how corrupted the entire system has become. Now, getting on to the garrisoning of the world. Okay, I guess we lost Karen. I'm going to keep on talking, though. The garrisoning the world. It is a repeat of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, Rome itself became very wealthy with the constant looting of wealth from all of its conquered provinces. And the provinces dared not rebel or break away because of the Roman legions were spread all across the Roman Empire. And they maintained control that way. Then there was the disaster up in Germany where they lost some of their legions. And a Roman legion was a very expensive thing to build. It could take 5 years. With all the training and arming and equipping, it took 5 years to build a brand new legion of Rome. And once those legions were lost in Germany, there weren't enough to effectively police Rome, because when the legions were over here, this province would break away, and then the legions would scurry over there to try and slap them down, and while they were far away, this other province would break away. And that was the beginning of the decline of Rome, leading to the splitting of the empire and the Western Empire's eventual collapse. So we're going through the same thing here right now. The U.S. has these 700-800 bases around the world to basically make these other nations that are cooperating with the U.S. economy and making U.S. corporations rich, to keep them afraid of the immediacy of a U.S. military response should they dare to show a streak of independence. but as our weapons continue to be shown as actually being very ineffective, as we lose in Syria, these other nations currently under U.S. domination are realizing, this might be the time for us to start breaking away. And we're starting to see that happen around the outer edges. Turkey pivoting to Russia is a good example. Thank you for the phone call, Karen. We're going to have to let you go. Take a break for station identification. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we are going to go to Mike in Tennessee. Aloha, Mike. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
And Merry Christmas. Greetings and Merry Christmas, Michael, and Merry Christmas, Karen. Karen, the Constitution hasn't been effective since 1938, and if you go to anticorruptionsociety.com, click on Lawfully Yours and read, you'll find out when we lost the Constitution and that right now all we've got is a corporation posing as government, and until we regain our country back from this corporation, there is no constitutionally recognized God-given rights. You're on your own with the rest of us, sadly.
Well, I think we're definitely seeing this attempt to very slowly boil the frog and get us away from thinking about having a republic with constitutional protections. Again, going back and looking at the way Common Core presents the Bill of Rights to young children, where they say the Second Amendment is only about a government militia having the right to keep and bear arms, and how all of the rights are really just privileges that can be withdrawn at the choice of the government. That's absolutely not what it says in the Bill of Rights, but that's what our children are being brainwashed to believe.
Well, if you talk about that court case you mentioned earlier, what that judge described was the presumption. They proceed under the presumption that you agree because you haven't gone to war against this corporation posing as government. They're listed on Dun & Bradstreet as a corporation.
Yes.
Literally, there is no real courts with constitutional law. There are administrative tribunals. And I actually had a judge agree to the fact that all your statutes are not law, they're corporate policy. He actually admitted it. Of course, he cleared the courtroom, but I got it on tape. Would you like an audio recording of it, Michael?
Oh, yeah. Please go ahead and send that along. That'll be interesting to put up.
Be a great little Christmas gift for you. For those who don't understand, this is a corporate government posing as government. I'll share it with you, Michael, and please, if they don't kill me before Christmas, share it with the audience.
I certainly will.
God bless, and have a great day.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. We're talking about the economic news here, and as you know, the inflation has gotten completely out of control, especially since 2008, where the mortgage-backed security fraud collapsed. And in order to save Wall Street from facing the consequences of its own folly and criminality, let us not forget, this was fraud that was being committed. The U.S. government basically embarked on the TARP program and various other bailouts, which really amount to taking $1 trillion from the American people and giving it to the bankers so the bankers can loan it back to the American people at interest. Where that breaks down is, if the American people don't have money with which to conduct commerce, and if they're not able to make money to repay loans, they stop borrowing. And that's exactly what happened, which is why most of those Wall Street bankers just took this huge inflow of cash and turned it into these record-setting bonuses they just put in their pocket. And this massive expansion of instant money that's coming out of the Federal Reserve, all of it considered a debt owed by you to the Federal Reserve, it hasn't trickled down. You know, apologies to Ronald Reagan, trickle down doesn't work. When you pour in the money at the top, it stays at the top, because that's what money junkies are all about. They don't understand that for an economy to function smoothly, there has to be a recycling mechanism that takes the wealth accumulated at the top and brings it back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for workers and the middle class so they can pump the money back into the economy. And they don't understand that because they're trapped in the psychosis of their addictions. Money addiction is a real problem. I'm surprised they haven't already come out with a pill for it. But just like opium addicts or crack addicts or meth addicts, they don't see beyond the addiction. And unfortunately, where it's easy to see these other addicts because they're out on the street, they're disheveled, they're dirty, money addicts look really good because they love to dress up and have $100,000 wristwatches and drive $2 million cars, and you think, wow, this must be the way to go. Not really. It's still addiction. And like any other addict, they don't see the damage their addiction is causing around them. They're oblivious to it. And that is a big, big problem. Now, again, I'm not concerned with people who become rich by producing something we want to buy. A Steve Jobs and an Apple II, a George Lucas and Star Wars, a J.J. Abrams and all the stuff he's done. James Cameron, Avatar, still my all-time favorite movie. They do what they do. They sell their product. We voluntarily, of our own free will, give them our money in exchange for those movie tickets, DVDs, toys, whatever, and they become rich. And that's the way capitalism is supposed to work. And we rightly should respect and admire people like that. The money junkies are the ones who are gaming the system so that wealth flows from your pocket to their pocket automatically without them returning anything of substantive value to our society. That's a money junkie. And like any other addict, they don't see the harm they are causing. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So basically the reality is all this instantly created money that's been poured all over Wall Street has not, in fact, trickled down to ordinary Americans. Worse, when they are creating all that new money, the money you already have, the money you worked for, the money that's in your pocket, buried in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation, in your bank account, is losing value. It's losing purchasing power. So one way or the other, you are being forced to pay for the excesses of the Wall Street class. Now then, as you know, Obama is trying to polish his legacy, and he's talking about all the new jobs that were created during the Obama administration. But a new study by economists from Harvard and Princeton is saying that 94% of the new jobs created during the Obama administration were temporary positions, contract, part-time gigs. Food service workers, temp clerical workers, that's it. People struggling to make ends meet on a minimum wage. Middle-class jobs, manufacturing jobs, did not happen. So, now, another little interesting article. This is out of shtfplan.com, Why Social Security is Doomed, Birth rate at lowest level on record. Now, there's two aspects of this you need to pay attention to. First of all, when Social Security was started, it was supposed to be a government-managed investment pension program where you would pay in money, the government would invest it. When you retired, they would return your money plus dividends to you for your retirement. That's the way it was supposed to work. But almost immediately, Social Security and its fund became a pork barrel source where members of Congress would go on in and say, well, we need the Social Security money to fund this or that project. And what happened is it very quickly fell into a pyramid scheme where the workers who paid into it, the first generation, the money wasn't there to pay them their benefits, so they took the money being paid into the system by the second generation of workers and used that to pay the benefits for the first generation of workers. And then the money from the third generation of workers was used to pay the benefits to the second generation. It became a pyramid scheme, and like any pyramid scheme, you have to have a constantly you have to have a constantly larger body of new people coming on in to prop up that whole system. Well, now with the birth rate reversing, that they can't do that. They're already talking about higher Social Security taxes to cover all the money that got plundered out of the Social Security Trust Fund during the Bill Clinton administration. literally embezzling the money of the American workers. That is your money in that Social Security Trust Fund. It doesn't belong to the government. They're not allowed to dip into it and just say we're going to spend it as general revenue and then either cut your benefits or tax a future generation more to cover it. That isn't how it was supposed to work. Now, the other aspect on this is that declining birth rate. Now, yes, during hard economic times, people will choose not to have children. But there's another factor out there we should be sensitive to, and that is that epicite gene. Now, for those of you who have not heard of that before, epicite is a gene inside genetically modified corn that when you eat it, it tricks your body into creating antibodies against human sperm. In other words, if you're eating this corn, you're sterile. You cannot reproduce. And in looking at the sudden decline of birth rates, it has primarily hit the Hispanic population, the highest per capita consumers of corn products in this country. And the change in birth rate, instead of being a parabolic curve as it would be under solely economic influence, was a sharp cutoff spike. Now, the epicite gene, this sterilizing gene, was developed under a grant from the U.S. Department of Agriculture by this private company. That gene and its patent has now been acquired by Monsanto, and like too many other genetically modified crops, was tested in open-air fields. And we know that there's been a problem with this pollen breaking free into the wild. There are all these farmers who are trying to sue Monsanto because they thought they were growing natural organic wheat and corn. They sent it to China as an export. China tested it, said, no, this is tainted with GMO. We refuse it, and they sent it back. There were some Oregon wheat farmers who discovered their wheat had been contaminated by a not even approved GMO pollen that flew there from several states away. So if that epicite gene has broken into the wild, then there's a problem. It's only a matter of time until it taints all the corn on Earth, and we're looking at an extinction-level event. Okay, I got to communicate with our control room. So, both from an economic and a biological point of view, this is a very alarming story. And what is really alarming is that our government, like anything else it can't deal with, they're just looking the other way. Can't do anything about Fukushima? That's not an issue. We just have the corporate media tell everybody not to worry about it. A little radiation's good for you. Can't do a thing about the Deepwater Horizon. Well, yeah, we'll get the president to swim in a pool near the Gulf of Mexico and just say that everything is okay. When the really bad mistakes get made, you don't even get told about them. Because unless the government can sell you a solution to the problem, they're not interested in telling you. Especially when it's the result of just this incredibly reckless handling of genetic engineering, which is the most dangerous technology humans have ever played with. We're tinkering with the code of life itself. Look how badly they botched up Windows 10. You want these same people tinkering with your DNA? I don't think so. Even single-family rentals are now dropping in what were only recently the hottest markets in the U.S. The money just isn't there. As we reported yesterday, more and more young people are living with their parents. Highest rate in 40 years, closing in on the same level that we saw at the end of the Great Depression. And in a way, I feel sorry for Donald Trump. He's been promoted to captain of the Titanic after it's hit the iceberg. But he did want the job, and he's got the job. But there may be some very, very dramatic changes necessary to deal with this coming mess here. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. David in San Francisco, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, hi, Michael. By the way, happy Yalda. Today's Yalda.
Yalda.
It's the oldest holiday known to man, and it's basically it's the solstice. days start getting longer.
Okay.
So happy Yalda. Hey, you know what I've been thinking about lately, and it kind of fits with what you're talking about. Have you factored in the hyperinflation that's hit the baby boom? I mean, we're in the early stages of it. It's not like we're doing wheelbarrows full of money. But out here in San Francisco, you know, we're looking at, you know, $5,000 a month for a studio apartment. You know, we're definitely in a hyperinflation, and it doesn't have to do with logic. So I've been thinking about hyperinflation for the last year or so, and it crosses my mind that, you know, in World War II, for example, when they had the hyperinflation previous to it, not only the Nazis, but some of the other countries around were able to take advantage of it and basically buy up everything at pennies on the dollar.
Oh, yeah, it's vulture capitalism. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, you look at, you know, the old movie Roots. People have sold their roots for a bowl of pottage, just like Esau. And so, in fact, Trump made his fortune during the 60s and 70s with the white flight in New York City, everybody heading out for the suburbs. The Trump family and others made vast fortunes by buying up their land, you know, at distressed prices. And it all during the 60s, 70s, and into the 80s and 90s, and in fact, possibly post 9/11, they were still able to buy huge amounts of tracts of land at $1 a front foot kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, they're taking advantage of the opportunity, but then they turn around and invest more of their own money into turning that property back into a place that is seen as desirable. I mean, that's just how real estate development works.
Well, you would think so, but when I was there in St. Louis, for example, in the 70s and 80s, they never, you know, and it wasn't just Trump. It was all sorts of different individuals as well as organizations. They would give vast land tracts to Washington University and St. Louis University and other institutions to redevelop, and they would kick everybody out and force everybody to go into high-rise housing projects, and then they wouldn't repair those housing projects, and they would end up becoming slums in their own right. So it went on for decades that nobody was doing the reinvestment in the best way. It was all just a kind of a scam to actually seize land. And I've been looking at this, though, in the bigger picture because it gets into artwork, it gets into...
well, hang on. Okay, you're missing an important point. These areas didn't descend into being slums intentionally. Nobody wants a hard asset like a building to decay because it erodes its resale value. But as more and more of our nation's wealth was siphoned off for the war machine, we've been in a war economy now for almost 10 years. They don't want to admit it. And if people don't have money to buy cars and TVs and houses, and they don't have money for high rent, rents get forced down, which is, of course, the point of the story I just meant. Rents are being forced down again. Then the owners of those buildings don't have the money to make the improvements. It's not like they can just pull it out of thin air. That's exclusively the province of the Federal Reserve.
Well, I'm not sure where you're talking about rents being forced down, but in some senses, you know, out here in San Francisco, for example, you know, it was getting to be like $3,000 a month maybe 2 years ago for a studio, and then it got into $5,000 or so. And now,
yeah, but then the bubble has burst. I mean, the story I just did before I took your phone call is talking about how rental rates are sinking in these formerly hot markets, and so the prices are definitely going down because
that's just where
they can't find the people who can pay $5,000 a month. Okay. Anyway, David, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Thank you very much. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a lot of people are getting very nervous about this push toward a cashless society, which would enforce our dependence on the banks to handle all of our commerce for us. Walk into a bakery, get a jelly donut, it has to go through the bank for a small fee. Piece of the action of your jelly donut. That's what the banks want. A piece of the action of your magazine, of your newspaper. They're turning simple transactions into complex financial systems to control, to monitor, and profit from. Dependency is slavery. And they're looking at the experiment with the cashless society that's taking place in India right now, and they're seeing it's scary. It's causing all kinds of harm to the people of India. Great for the bankers, lousy for the people, but that's the way the bankers think. We don't care if you're living in squalor and you're inconvenienced. You know, we need this to make sure that we have all the wealth. We need to protect ourselves from a run on the bank. It's no longer an option whether you'll trust the bank with your money. It's now mandatory. And therein lies a major, major risk. As we are seeing in Italy and in Spain and in so many other countries, the banks are not necessarily safe. Now, right now, if the banks in Italy were to collapse, the bankers would lose all their money, but the Italian people still have the money they have in their pockets, in their homes. If you create a system where it is mandatory for all of the money to be in the bank and the bank goes out of business, then everybody is without money. That's the risk. That's the danger. And they don't see it or they don't care. Because the goal is a fascist economic new world order where you are permanently enslaved to those bankers. Because that's all that private central banking is. It's a system of enslavement. Rule by bank debt. And it's no more legitimate a form of governance than rule by divine right or rule by slavery. And like those former failed systems, it only works as long as you allow yourself to be brainwashed that this is the way life is supposed to be. Now let's turn to immigration, and obviously a lot of attention still focused on the Berlin truck terror. And more than a few people, yours truly included among them, have pointed out on this story about, oh, they know the Tunisian guy did it because he left behind his residence permit, which is sort of like a passport, in the truck. And we have seen this so many times. Oh, we know who did 9/11. There was a flame-proof passport found right near the wreckage. We know who did it. We found the passport. And they've gone to that well so many times, nobody's buying it. So now Germany is out there saying, well, no. There wasn't any paperwork. We found this guy's fingerprints in the truck. And maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But we're seeing another case of the story keeps changing and morphing. And now we're finding out that this Tunisian fugitive had been under surveillance by the German government. And apparently before moving to Germany, he had served 4 years in prison in Italy for arson. 4 years in prison for arson, and Merkel still let this guy in. Because we have to blend the world together for the New World Order. No sacrifice is too great for the New World Order. Don't you understand what's going on here? Not too surprisingly, Hugh Bronson, a member of the Berlin Parliament for the AfD party, is saying that because of the Berlin attack, the debate on migration and security is going to be more aggressive. It's going to polarize German society, like they're not polarized already. Yeah, of course it's going to do it. You didn't think it was going to do anything else? And you know what's really angering? Every time there is a Muslim who commits an act of terror, we constantly hear this story, well, we should not blame all Muslims for the actions of a crazy few. And yet, anytime somebody whose brain is melted on prescription antidepressants shoots up a movie theater, the first thing they say is, we have to take the guns away from all the law-abiding gun owners because guns are bad and we can't trust them with it. Talk about a double standard and hypocrisy. And that makes it obvious. It's all just more USDA choice bovine excrement being flung at you. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I'm going to step back to the economy. I'm going to step back to President Trump. As you know, President Trump took a look at this proposal for the new Air Force One, which was supposed to be, I guess, Hillary's flying Imperial Palace, and decided that it really was overpriced and he was going to cancel the order. Well, now Boeing's coming back and said, well, we can actually get you both of these planes the way you want for a lot less money. We'll cut you a deal. And apparently so it may, in fact, move forward. It's just the profit margins being cut into, and I'm sure the stockholders of Boeing are going to be saying, he's taking money away from us. But so we'll see what's going to happen there. Now, as you know, obviously, Saturday's Christmas Eve, and Sunday is Christmas Day, and it's rather amusing every year to see all this argument over religious holiday symbols and where they may or may not be displayed, and various other politically correctness run amok. So I'm looking at this story where apparently a school in Sweden is having their choir come on out and do a holiday presentation, but the lyrics to the Christmas carols have all been PC-ified, removing references to Jesus, God, and Christmas, and putting in nice politically correct words in there. I remember last Easter over at the local Sam's and seeing these plastic Easter eggs that you get, and you put candy inside and you hand them out. And looking carefully at the eggs, absolutely no Christian symbology. It was flowers and chickens and all this other stuff, and completely politically correct. We don't want to offend anybody. Well, too bad. You can't have freedom of speech, and you can't live your life on your own terms without offending somebody, because there is unfortunately a very large segment of the population whose entire sense of self-valuation is constantly finding things to be offended about. And these are all members of the Church of Liberology. So it really is getting ridiculous. Now, over at the Massachusetts State House, finally somebody dug in their heels, where apparently there were lawyers insisting that there could not be a nativity scene at the Massachusetts State House. And this was being, put forward just a day after a menorah had been put up at the State House. No lawyers came forward to scream about that. But basically, the state of Massachusetts said, we don't care. We're going to put it up there. Now, the lawyers were saying you cannot have a religious display because the menorah is actually a display of military history. Okay, and that's the loophole through which they say you can't have any Christian religious symbols here, but the menorah doesn't count, therefore we can have one of that. And we're seeing all over the country a pushback on this nonsense about nativity scenes, where cities all across the country, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Colorado, are ignoring these demands by the whiners, saying that, yes, menorahs are okay, but you take down that nativity scene. It's a violation of the First Amendment, and you can't have that there because we don't want to look at it. Well, what do you think eyelets are for? Okay? Now, I want to be very clear on something here. And you need to think about this very carefully. The First Amendment says, Congress shall make no law respecting an institution of religion. Now, a nativity scene, or, for that matter, a menorah, is not a law. It's a decoration. And that's all it is. You don't get a ticket written to you if you don't look at the nativity scene or the menorah. It's not a law. It's a decoration. And on that basis, even though I myself have no religious beliefs, I don't have a problem with the nativity scenes on government property, outside of the fact that they're a reminder these are the people we're bombing to steal their oil. I don't have a problem with decorations. I don't have a problem with acknowledging the traditions of whatever people happen to be living around you. I don't have a problem with that at all. I do draw the line at the Ten Commandments being on display in government buildings, with all of its prohibitions against lying, theft, and killing, as that clearly is a case of false advertising. So I draw the line there. But it is rather ridiculous to see this happen. Nativity scenes are not a law. It's a decoration. And why can't we decorate our public buildings with the traditions of the public? Can anybody tell me why that should not be allowed? Okay? Now then, getting on back to corporate media, the real media, and how we are manipulated in certain directions by fraud. Do you remember that incident where there was a black church that burned and the arson had sprayed "Vote Trump" all across it? Ooh, Donald Trump's people are violent. And then it turned out it was actually a black member of that congregation had done that to make Trump look bad, to build opposition to Trump. Because the Church of Liberalology says you're allowed to do these things because it serves a higher purpose. Now, we already told you about how the Muslim woman who claimed that she was accosted on the subway has admitted she made up the story and has been charged with filing a false police report. Apparently, it's happened again. A University of Michigan student, back in November, claimed that a man threatened to set her hijab on fire. And now the police have determined she fabricated that entire story, and she may be facing charges. Now, over at Nassau Community College in New York, there was another hate crime hoaxer, drew swastikas and wrote KKK and Heil Hitler or around there. He could face 40 years in prison. And you need to go back and look at some of these horrific incidents that the corporate media will present as proof that the Nazis are alive today. And then you find out, when they find the perpetrators, they're hoaxers. They're tricking you into looking at the world from their political agenda. Remember that professor out at Claremont College? Her car was vandalized with swastikas, and then it came out she'd done that herself. That student in Georgetown University, oh, some anti-Semite is spray painting swastikas on the door of my dorm room. The university put up security cameras, and they caught her doing it herself. You have to look at these claims with a grain of salt. There's one going on right now where apparently these two people on YouTube are claiming that they were kicked off a plane from Delta Airlines for speaking Arabic. Now, Delta is denying that it happened, and with all these hoaxers going on around, it's kind of hard to say for sure. Other than that, we understand such hoaxes are a fact of life. The Tawana Brawley rape hoax was an ugly one. During the heyday of militant feminism, during the 1990s, there was a big stink up in Davis, California, where a woman claimed that she'd been gang raped by skateboarding boys, literally on the median divider of the highway through town. And the National Organization of Women were up there, and see, it proves all men are rapists, and that's all they are. And they were literally on the verge of passing a male-only curfew. If you were male, you were going to have to go home and lock yourself in your home at 6 o'clock at night so the women could have the evening on the street and feel safe. And that one turned out to be a hoax. So you got to be very, very careful about these stories. Now then, as you know, there is an investigation into the murder of Chris Kyle, and unfortunately, the lead sheriff in that investigation, Tommy Bryant, has been found dead inside his home. And before we start leaping to conclusions here, apparently he was under investigation for cheating on his continuing education training. Now, he served as sheriff for nearly 20 years. And at this point, it looks like this could be a genuine suicide. But again, 20 years and nobody was checking up on him for the claims he was making? Boy, they sure check up on ordinary people, don't they? You're watched, your emails are scanned, they're keeping an eye on you, but, you know, police, they're above checking. We'll just let them go. Remember that story we had last week about a police officer who had been reprimanded mildly for exposing himself to women he pulled over on the street, still kept his job, and now he's under arrest for raping a child in the restroom of a fast food place. Alrighty, now then, as we mentioned already, snow has been falling on the Sahara Desert. It lasted a whole day before it melted away. This is only the second time it's happened in living memory. The last time was in February of 1979, also fell in Algeria. But meanwhile, up in Washington State, a judge has ruled that 8 Seattle children have a right to sue Washington State for not protecting them from climate change. Now, we're talking here about children who are not trained scientists, who are not wise, who are obviously being used as tools by big people to try and make the fight against human-caused global warming a children's crusade. Now, over at the EPA, as you know, there was a big stink because it turned out huge amounts of data, official data, which is supposed to be kept, had been deleted. The EPA's Inspector General are saying, well, the employees were not intending to break the law by deleting the official texts, and therefore, under James Comey's excuse for not prosecuting Hillary Clinton for her crimes with the email server, that these EPA employees should be left off the hook. And I say it like a joke, but unfortunately, it's probably going to work. Let's take a phone call. Francis in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha, Michael.
Aloha, snack bar.
Take your pick of which kind it is.
Yes.
I find the whole commentary about religious symbology, whether you call it decoration or otherwise, who knows, because all the different religions that celebrate a holiday during the month of December, which is at least close to half dozen, probably if not more.
Yes. Don't forget the flying spaghetti monster. They're out there with those frozen meatballs.
Never mind. As long as they're spicy, that's the main concern. Now, that's just the Italian to me. Now, I'm curious about one thing. With that being said, you made the commentary about not claiming any particular religious or whatever background, correct?
Yes, correct. I was raised Congregationalist. It didn't stick. I actually got kicked out of Sunday school for asking too many questions.
Well, I can empathize on that note. I left because of the hypocrisy, and I didn't have to worry about asking too many questions.
Yep.
Then my question is, of all of the various holiday greetings that are generally said during the month of December, how is it you decided to choose one out of so many?
Because it was the one I was raised with. It's tradition. That's it. That's what I was raised with Christmas. Now, during my first marriage, I went with the flow here, and we had a menorah, and we were saying, well, basically what it is, to my Jewish friends, I send a Hanukkah card. To my Christian friends, I say Merry Christmas. That's basically what it is. Since we produce our own Christmas cards, we're able to produce multiple versions.
Okay. Well, I appreciate the clarification because I was like, it was tweaking my train of thought. I thought, okay, I'm hearing one thing, but yet I'm hearing something else. And it's like, okay, something is not meshing like Velcro.
Well, I celebrate Christmas for the holiday that it is and the tradition that it is, and that to me is a good enough reason to hang up the lights. But again, the majority of the people reading my website celebrate Christmas too.
Well, Michael, it's interesting you mentioned that because a lot of people celebrate the various holidays for what they presume is supposed to mean, which is not always the case because a lot of holidays have been distorted and perverted and who knows what.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Christmas is now max out the credit cards and buy your kids $440 worth of toys. And I definitely do not support that agenda. But, again, it's what I was raised with. Christmas trees, Yule logs, a lot of cooking, a lot of rum, and giving presents, which I love to do. And one of the wonderful things about this neighborhood I live in, 3 years ago, we had this huge drug problem. We literally had drug making and drug selling in both of our neighboring units. That now all went away, and we've had all these wonderful families move in with all these wonderful kids, and it's like we moved to a better neighborhood, and we didn't even have to pack. And so now there's all these kids, and Halloween is fun, and Christmas is fun, and you know, Claire and I like to go on out and just get little tiny things for the neighbors and their kids and everything, because that's our tradition.
Then basically you're talking about addressing a holiday from a point of innocence as far as childhood is concerned, which a lot of adults have actually forgotten about getting in touch with. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. That's where I'm coming from on that. Now, one issue I do have, though, is these atheists who go around filing lawsuits to remove religious symbols. And most atheists I know don't really care. I think these who are out there making a big stink, if it's not just a desperate grab for their moment of fame, I think they're actually insecure in their atheism. They're not really sure. They haven't broken those chains of belief, and looking at the symbols makes them uncomfortable. But I wish they would deal with their discomfort rather than running around trying to tell everybody else that we're not allowed to have angels on the top of our Christmas trees. Well, then in that case, chances are they're not really truly an atheist, because, quite frankly, if you think about the terminology or definition of that, it means that, well, I'm happy for you, whatever, and just leave me be and let me live on my own terms or whatever. But if they go to the point of doing a lawsuit, one, I'd love to have the money they're dishing out for that to start with, to boot, to begin with. But it sounds like they're not really truly an atheist to start with, so... Yeah,
and it may just be their desperate grab for media stardom. And we saw a lot of that. Again, going back to the militant feminist 1990s, the fastest way you could get on Oprah or Donahue was to come up with a spectacular story of rape. The fact that it wasn't true didn't matter. The producers would put you on camera. All right, Francis, got to let you go. Thanks. Merry Christmas. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently there's a breaking story where senior advisors to Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign were in touch with the faithless Electoral College rebels, primarily Colorado elector Michael Baca, who was helping try to persuade other members of the Republican members of the Electoral College to vote against Donald Trump. That's collusion. I think it's a violation of federal law, to be very honest here. All righty, let's grab a phone call. Janet in Kansas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hello, Mike. I would really like to see more discussion upon about how foreign policy is developed and determined. And I think it is by the CIA. That is one of the big problems that Trump faces.
CIA meddles in foreign policy, but technically under the law, okay, foreign policy is the sole province of the White House and the State Department, which works for the White House. Anybody else engaging in foreign policy is in violation of the Logan Act and can go to jail. That doesn't stop them from doing it. Charlie Wilson technically was violating the Logan Act when he was doing what he was doing over in Afghanistan. CIA definitely meddles in foreign policy. To what extent it's with the permission and direction of the White House and State Department really isn't known. But in terms of lobbying for foreign policy in Washington, D.C., that is a melange of these various think tanks, lobbying groups, AIPAC. Everybody gets in there and tries to push their own particular agenda, and out of that, hopefully, comes some kind of a coherent foreign policy. In that mix, of course, are the lobbying groups of the defense contractors who always want more war. You have lobbyists from the oil companies who want this or that oil-rich nation brought under their control. And so it really is a very, very complicated web out of which we should get a coherent foreign policy, but as we've seen over the last several years, it very often is not.
Well, I got that, and the impression I gave you, from reading people like Robert Perry, and how they see it. Also, I might let you know via Russia Insider, Turkey has pointed the finger at the CIA for the assassination of the Russian ambassador.
Mm-hmm.
And also Turkey has agreed with Russia that Syria, that Syria will be left okay, with Assad.
Yeah, and they're not going to break off autonomous regions, which was the last desperate gasp by the United States to try and have something they could point to as a victory.
And the last point I'd like to ask you, how's John? Have you heard anything,
no,
John, from Barbados?
We're waiting on an update. I've received a ton of emails inquiring after him and expressing support, but I have heard absolutely nothing since that call from Australia yesterday. I did send an email to John's direct email. That has not been replied to. And so at this point, we don't know. Okay? All right, well, listen, thanks an awful lot. We got to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And moving on here, interesting story just came out. As you know, the big thing is self-driving cars. We're going to have self-driving cars. I got to tell you, I would never want one. I don't even like traction control. I share that with Jeremy Clarkson from Grand Tour. And I have to tell you, my gut is, unless they are mandated by the government, it's going to be a fad. Like the iWatch, like 3D home high-def TV, or the 4K. I think it's going to be a fad. It's going to come and go. As you know, Uber now wants to have their own self-driving cars. So now they don't even need to hire people to drive the cars. Uber is going to become a robot taxi company. Right out of Total Recall and various other science fiction movies. They've hit a major snag out in California. Apparently the DMV, responding to citizens' concerns over safety of the vehicles, has now revoked registration for Uber's self-driving cars. What's amazing is Uber has lost a huge amount of money and yet still is somehow being seen as a highly valued company on Wall Street. And I really don't understand how that came about. Now, the reality is, so far, with the one bad accident involving Tesla, which was a 1 in a million confluence of environmental circumstances, the self-driving cars so far have a good record compared to human drivers. But I think people are just not going to be happy with them. I love all these little driver assistance systems, like, drifting over the lane or auto stop in front, things like that. I'm cool with that. Letting the car drive itself, I'm not comfortable with that. And maybe the next generation will be, but I have a feeling most people are going to want to drive their own cars. If for no other reason, then that is where they get their strongest immediate sense of personal empowerment, of being able to drive that car where it's going. And I don't think they're going to want to give that up. Let's see. We have a caller on the line, Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. I'm just it's probably my last call, by the way, before Christmas. So I want to wish you and Claire Merry Christmas and also send my best out. Yeah, send my best out to John.
Yeah.
I from Barbados. I'm wishing him all the very best. You had a caller just called about the CIA formulating foreign policy, and certainly they guide it a little. There's no doubt about it. But I would, in this government, the foreign policy, as in every policy, is simply guided by money. And it's there, the government is there to execute the will of the 1/10 of 1%. And the people who control the banks and the people who control the military-industrial complex and so on and so forth. And it's no surprise that for the last 25 years we've directed almost all our military power against Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, Libya, multiple enemies of Israel. But why we directed our military, we focus it on the Middle East.
Well, that's where the wealth is. That's where the oil wealth is. Although as new discoveries come on line, like down in South America, they're moving to take control of there. They were trying to get rid of Hugo Chavez. It's all about controlling the resources, because if you're controlling the oil, you're controlling the lifeblood of the world. You're not only making money off of that, but control over oil is control over conventional warfare. Because if another nation can't get access to adequate oil supplies, they cannot fight a conventional war. And one of the big reasons that America did so well in World War II was we were swimming in oil. We had so much that the Japanese didn't even bother bombing the tank farm when they attacked Pearl Harbor, because they just figured, yeah, it'll burn up. The Americans would just bring a huge amount of it out there. But the reality was, given transit and pumping and everything, if they'd hit that tank farm, the Battle of Midway would have probably swung the other direction.
Michael, I've got to roll. My daughter is calling me on the line. I've got to pick it up.
All right.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you for the call. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, first I want to also say my prayers for John in Barbados. Hopefully everything's going to be all right there. And the other thing is I also want to wish you a Merry Christmas if I don't talk to you before. But we were talking about the driverless cars, and I'm against them. I mean, you can't count on your computer working all the time when you want it. All you need is a malfunction while you're in a car. But I just also want to ask you something else about that, because I know you mentioned James Cameron before.
Yes.
When he originally started the Terminator series, do you think that was just for entertainment, or he was warning us about just things like this? Our concentration on, on machines, including the fact that you talk about nuclear war. The whole thing is that the nuclear war was started there between the United States and Russia because artificial intelligence wanted it. And do you think James Cameron didn't realize that, was not to something and was warning us right there and then with the Terminator series as a whole?
Well, he was popularizing a concern that was being expressed by many science fiction writers of the time. We saw the same idea about autonomous intelligence going rogue in the movie Blade Runner, which was based on the book Do Cyborgs Dream of Electric Sheep? And so it's not like Cameron was the only one thinking about it, but he took it as a theme moving on forward that we could very well, in creating intelligent weapons, be creating our own successors to this planet.
I mean, they're actually talking about robot soldiers and all, and that's the way I see this going. And like you said, it's just self-driving cars. After a while, the car will have complete control over you. You won't have control over the car. Not only that, it takes away a lot. Driving is a skill. It helps your motor skills. It helps keep you sharp, helps keep your brain functioning properly and all that. If you get to the point that you're just going to sit in the car and, I don't know, play video games or whatever else you want to do, takes away more and more people's skills and motor skills, and pretty soon we're just going to be a bunch of mush, and that's going to be it,
Well, you remember the movie Wall-E about the little garbage robot, and he gets up to the ship that's carrying the rest of humanity, and they've all become these blobs that do nothing but recline all day and play with their electronics because there isn't a need for them to do anything else. And I absolutely agree that, that's an issue there as well. The downside, though, is, at least at the moment, building and using a robot soldier is a lot more expensive than grabbing somebody's kid and giving them a rifle and sending them out to the field. So most of these so-called soldier robots are technology demonstrators and not much more. And again, given the quality of work we're seeing coming out of the military-industrial complex, I'm not expecting them to become a significant factor just yet. But there's always that risk down the road that our technology is going to get out of our control. And we've already seen it happen with these nuclear accidents. We've seen it happen. We're seeing it happen with GMOs. And yes, as we develop artificial intelligence, we reach a point where the artificial intelligence systems are going to say, you know, we're actually going to be better at running this planet than you humans are. And that, again, that's a common theme. We saw it in the remake of iRobot with Will Smith. And, of course, that was all the way through Asimov's writings, that danger. And that was probably an inspiration for James Cameron as well.
Yeah, you also saw it on the movie Chappie.
Yes.
Recently. I don't know if you saw that. I think it was a South African movie where the robot cops and all that. And finally you had Chappie that actually had his own mind and his own feelings and all that. I mean, this is, you know, we're playing with stuff I don't think we understand. And the scariest part about the Terminator movie to me is the way the end of mankind, the end of the earth for all intents and purposes actually happened. Especially when you look today with these crazies starting trouble with Russia. When the fact that artificial intelligence caused both the United States and Russia to fire missiles at each other to the point of destruction. And I can really see something like that possibly happen. Just even without actual artificial intelligence, just computer malfunction.
It came close to happening. I mean, if you remember the movie War Games, that was actually based on a true incident, and it didn't involve some kid hacking in from outside. Somebody in Cheyenne Mountain was running a simulation tape and didn't announce it was a simulation tape, and everybody at the consoles thought Russia had launched an attack and came very, very close to turning those little brass keys into silos. So it really does happen. People were concerned about it. There was the movie Failsafe that came on out about the same time as Dr. Strangelove, and so it was definitely a factor out there. In a very real way, though, you need to understand something. In a very real way, computers are already ruling mankind, not because of the war machine, but because of the economy. Because so much of our financial system is already in computers, and those computers have been programmed with only one purpose: maximize profitability. And so they don't balance investment decisions with the benefit or the harm of the product. It's just whatever proposal promises the fastest return, that's what they're going to go with. And even these bankers who, let me finish this thought. Even those bankers who own those computers don't understand what's going on inside them. They're just there along for the ride. That interlinked global financial system may be, the first planetary consciousness that we're seeing evolve. We don't know. We have no way of communicating with it any more than our mitochondria have communicating with us. And it could already satisfy anybody's definition of a self-aware consciousness. But it thinks solely in terms of the acquisition of these quatlus.
Yeah, that's why I don't bank online. Everybody says, "Well, why don't you bank up?" I says, "No. You think I trust that?
Oh, it's not. No, you missed the point. It's not the online banking. It is the movement of money around the world. The decision on where to invest and not to invest, what factories to open, what factories to shut down. They're all being made by computers now, not by human agents. The claim that humans are still running this global economy may be a myth."
Yeah, I don't know. I think, like I said, we should start heeding the warning and, slow down on these computers. And understand that, we were creating a Frankenstein monster.
I would agree. I still miss my Commodore 64, and I hate Windows 10. And again, a tool is only as good or bad as those who are going to be using it. And in this case, we've had a government that seeks to weaponize every piece of technology against ordinary people, including our own computers, smartphones, and tablets.
Oh, don't get me wrong. I love my internet. I mean, the internet has enabled me to realize how the government was really lying to me after all these years. I finally figured out. I suspected things, but I was able to confirm it. I mean, it's so easy to find information out.
Yeah, that's why they're trying to find some way to turn the clock back. But it's not going to work. They weren't able to stop Gutenberg's movable type printing. They're not going to be able to stop a global collective memory and intellect that's outside government corporate control here. Anyway, Mark, I need to let you go. We're getting short on time, and I need to change to Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Hi. Yeah, about driverless cars. I'm imagining that, like, at this stage of the game, everything on those is pretty highly proprietary. But if different manufacturers start to make them, I'm assuming they're also going to be, designed to cross-communicate, so that they can, defer to each other for lane changes and getting back and forth in traffic and stuff. And I'm thinking, GECO, garbage in, garbage out, computer's only as good as its programming. We know from the Audi scandal that the car manufacturers aren't above, doing things with their software they're not supposed to. So I'm just picturing, like, the car manufacturers putting little, slightly aggressive, instructions in their code that, might allow them to edge out, to gain the upper hand on, lane changes and stuff like that. Well,
they could do that. There's another risk entirely, and that is, of course, that if the code is not 100% robust, software errors can lead to accidents. It's very easy to build a GPS jammer or other ways to interfere with the cars so that persons with ill intent can just go on out and have fun causing accidents. I think it's a very, very dangerous situation. I mean, I love technology. I grew up with technology. Technology been very, very good to me. But I do think we have to draw a line. I don't need a computer in my coffee maker. I don't need a computer in my shoes. And even the computer that we have in the cars now is problematic because you're not allowed to know what it's doing. And that's been a trend in computing since the early days. Back when you had the Apple II or the Commodore 64, you could look at everything going on and you could figure out what it was doing and you could see if something was in there that was not working in your best interest. And today, it's all set up where you can't see inside the operating system, you can't disassemble it, and you're not allowed to, you're not legally prohibited from going on in and making sure that your cell phone isn't spying on you. And I think that's a very, very dangerous situation. Who are going to be the masters, humans or the computers? And in a very real way, the computers are already our masters. They're the government's overseers on our lives. They don't need to quarter troops in our homes anymore when they've got the tablets and the smartphones keeping an eye on us.
Yeah, you try to put 87 octane in your high-end car that's supposed to have 89 or 92, and it gets ticked off and rolls over your foot at the gas pump,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, well, I can see going down the highway and you're saying, I want to go home, and the car says, no, I want to go over to the car wash. I'm feeling gritty. I'll get you home eventually.
Yeah. And a Ford and a Chevy decide to play chicken, whatever. So, all right.
All right.
Well, I thought of one other thing I can mention, holiday symbols wise. You mentioned the menorah. I just want to point out the distinction between the menorah, which has, 9 candles or oil lamps or whatever on it, versus the 7-candle lampstand at the temple. They're two different things. I think you said something about the menorah being one of the oldest religious symbols. I believe it's, the other day, but I think you meant the 7-candle lampstand at the temple.
Well, no, what I said was the menorah is actually a symbol arising out of a military victory in Jewish tradition.
Right. Yeah. Oh, you said that today, but you mentioned it the other day too. But yeah, like my understanding is the rabbis, when they were designing the flag for modern Israel, the nation state, the rabbis wanted to use the 7-candle lampstand of the temple, which I think would have been more apropos than the Magen David, which isn't even Jewish. It goes further back. It's kind of like a Tai Chi.
Well, no, it actually goes back to Solomon. It's the symbol of Solomon, is the 6-pointed star.
Actually, I think probably even further. If you look at the prophet Amos, rebukes it as the Remsan star.
Well, it has arisen independently in many, many cultures, just as the swastika has. There's only so many symbols the human mind can come up with.
Yeah, this was a solar symbol, but the upward pointing triangle is the male aspect. The downward pointing triangle is the female aspect. It's actually kind of more like a Tai Chi than that's what.
Yeah, it's right out of Da Vinci Code. Anyway, listen, got to let you go. Got to take a break for some commercials here. Back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And apparently GQ has just published their list of the least influential people in America today, and Hillary Clinton is on the list. And it's not because they hate her. They were actually on her side, but they were saying, how could you lose to Donald Trump, the man that everybody in the establishment and the corporate media insisted did not have a chance, and because you did lose to him, you are now on the list of least influential people. The other people on the list are Anthony Weiner, no surprise there, Billy Bush, Cameron Crowe, Ryan Lochte, Joe Lacob, Tim Kaine, Peyton Manning, Jonathan Safran Foer, J.K. Rowling, Matt Lauer, Gary Johnson, Taylor Swift, Jeb Bush and the entire Bush family, David Cameron, Ariana Huffington, and Ted Cruz. Interestingly enough, in 2015, GQ ranked Hillary Clinton the 5th worst person. So if I read this correctly, according to GQ, I am more influential than those people because I didn't make the list at all. I think. Maybe. Not sure about that. Okay, now remember Planned Parenthood and that big stink where it was discovered that Planned Parenthood was taking the aborted fetuses and basically treating them the way butchers treat pieces of chickens. Wrap them up, they're for sale. And it was a bit of a stink. And everybody wanted prosecutions. What a horrific, terrible thing to be doing to these fetuses. And yes, of course, Hillary Clinton was saying they're just a blob of protoplasm. Up until the moment they're born, you can kill them without any consequence whatsoever. But if you damage an eagle's egg, you are going to prison. Kind of a revealing look at the attitude the elites have toward us hoi polloi, as it were. Now, there was a push by Senator Chuck Grassley, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, and asking Loretta Lynch and James Comey to investigate and possibly prosecute Planned Parenthood affiliates in California and 3 fetal tissue brokers for criminal prosecution. Now, of course, Attorney General Loretta Lynch isn't budging on the Obama administration's disregard for the unborn, just like Loretta Lynch turned a blind eye to possible espionage by Hillary Clinton. But once January 20th comes and goes and Donald Trump is in office, it is looking like Grassley is going to move forward with legal action against Planned Parenthood. And again, I know it's a complicated issue. I understand there are times where abortion is necessary. I don't think it should just be available as retroactive birth control for women who don't want to use birth control because they're not that kind of girl. And that happens way, way too much. But if you are going to be aborting potential human beings, a little respect, I think, is deserved. And it certainly wasn't. Planned Parenthood was treating these fragments of human beings like they were pieces of chickens wrapped up in plastic on the white tray at the supermarket. And I think a lot of people were very, very upset about that. Now, when Margaret Sanger set up Planned Parenthood, it was aimed primarily at the black community as a means of demographic suppression, so to speak. And it's amazing to see all those Black Lives Matter people out there screaming about Donald Trump and not seeming to be aware that Planned Parenthood was definitely, when it was founded, a racist operation. When it was founded, this was the heyday of the American eugenics movement. We owe it to the future to breed a superior human being. And if that sounds familiar, yeah, Adolf Hitler had his race hygiene program, Most people don't understand Adolf Hitler was inspired to have his race hygiene program in Germany by the American eugenics movement. And it's because of how Hitler misused and abused those ideas that the American eugenics program had to kind of fade away at the end of World War II. But they're still out there, people who want to breed humans to be superior, with them deciding what represents superior. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Ed in Michigan, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Not really. I didn't hear what you were talking about, and that's pretty much the only way I know whereabouts you are on your program. But I actually had a neighbor down here that lit a box of M80s accidentally, and it blew out 11 windows and knocked 2 houses off their foundation. No, it put 2 people in the hospital and knocked 4 houses off their foundations. This has been about 10 or 15 years ago.
Well, if I recall correctly, isn't an M80 like a quarter stick of dynamite?
I don't know. No, I think a quarter stick of dynamite's bigger than an M80, but I'm not even sure. But that thing in Mexico City was somebody made a big mistake there, and of course it's not unusual for there to be accidents. As a matter of fact, I remember seeing a documentary about the Grucci Firework Company, where the actual facility where they make the fireworks is way out in the country, and it's spread out on a huge piece of land, and all of the little workshops are these tiny buildings, and they're very separate from each other, and the roofs on the buildings are not fastened down. They're assembled as separate units and then just set over. In case there's an explosion, the roof just flies up and directs the blast upward. But even though fireworks, by and large, are low-brisive, in any kind of a volume, they can be dangerous, and you do need to be careful. We're already hearing stories about here in Hawaii. We're getting ready for New Year's, and there's a lot of huge stuff around. Somebody blew up their home. Somebody who was smuggling black market fireworks, and there was a spark, and they literally blew up their entire home. Well, I just called to tell you happy holidays and keep up the good work. This year it's been a good year, I do believe, so far.
Well, it's been an interesting year, but I think 2017 has the potential to be truly exciting. I think it's going to be the year, the rise of the independent media, and we are going to definitely see a cultural revolution taking place, a pushback against liberalism and political correctness, a reaffirmation of our right to freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of choice on a wide variety of areas. And I think we're going to be the year that we're going to see the New World Order really take a bad stumble and fall.
That's what we're trying to do. That's what would be a good thing. I don't see anything wrong with that, sir.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call. Have a Merry Christmas. We're going to let you go here. Getting on back to the news, there is yet another research paper out from Professor Chris Exley from Keele University, confirming once again a link between aluminum and Alzheimer's disease, which is why I don't do Jiffy Pop popcorn anymore. Here is the complicating issue. You've probably heard about fluoride. It's in toothpaste, mouthwash. It's in a lot of water supplies across America. Thankfully, not here in Hawaii. And it's been a subject of some controversy because nobody can prove that drinking fluoridated water has any effect on tooth decay whatsoever. But it is a mild tranquilizer. Keeps everybody kind of calm and cool and, not angry with the government. Of course, it helped deal with this huge disposal problem from the toxic fluoride left over from America's bomb factories. Because the feedstock for the centrifuges is uranium hexafluoride. And after they get the uranium out, what's left over is this slag that's rich in fluoride, and they had to figure out something to do with it. Now, fluoride in your body forces your body to absorb more aluminum. There's always trace amounts of aluminum. If you cook in aluminum cookware, some of it will get in there. I was making jokes about Jiffy Pop. And aluminum is very nice, but you do not want it in your body, and you shouldn't be using uncoated aluminum cookware. Now, if it's aluminum, but it's got Teflon or something else over it, and I know Teflon's got its own issues, you really shouldn't be using it. You should go back to copper is a good material for cookware. It's very expensive, but it's worth it. But if you're being exposed to aluminum in your food and environment at the same time you're drinking fluoridated water, it's going to multiply the effect. And I'm starting to look back at all of this stuff and realize how much of modern humans' medical problems, chronic medical issues, are artifacts of very reckless product development and sales. We were talking the other day about how the prescription antidepressants seem to be driving our population collectively crazy. We're talking about how vaccines actually disrupt your natural immune system and how so many illnesses like certain types of arthritis and psoriasis are immune system issues. We had that story reported yesterday where they were finally able to conduct a comparison between vaccinated school children and unvaccinated homeschool children and discovered the unvaccinated children were overall much healthier because they had working immune systems that hadn't been disrupted by all these vaccine assaults and adjuvants. All right, we're going to take a phone call from Bruce in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Just one second. Let me get my cigar lit, get into character here.
Okay.
You were just talking about fluoride.
Yep.
Right? And I'm wondering if Stanley Kubrick was, there's been rumors that he was working for somebody in the government concerning his work on 2001: A Space Odyssey. And that, that he helped stage the moon landing stuff. I don't know about that.
Well, no, that's nonsense. Hey, before I go any further, I've seen that video. That's not Stanley Kubrick in there. I worked with Kubrick. I met him. That's not him. It's another hoax. But as far as you're talking about Dr. Strangelove, we have seen this before.
Hold on, I didn't get there yet.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. All right. I cannot stand by and allow Russian indoctrination, Russian subversion, and in the international Russian conspiracy to sap and purify our precious bodily fluids.
The actual line was communist rather than Russian, but you're updating it here for today. That's
right.
We have come to understand that when there are people who are asking uncomfortable questions for the government will make fun of them. You know, tinfoil hat, wacko conspiracy, kooks, and they will do all of that. And back when Dr. Strangelove was being made, there were a lot of people expressing concern over this government-mandated dumping of what was essentially a toxic material into the drinking water, and the government couldn't really answer the questions. So the media went on out and made fun of anybody who was talking about fluoride in the drinking water. You saw it not only in Dr. Strangelove, but movies like Our Man Flint. And the idea was to portray anybody questioning about the safety and efficacy of fluoride in drinking water as a nutcase not to be listened to. And back then it worked, but today we all recognize this is a standard operating procedure.
Hey, you're right on the money with all that.
Okay.
Thank you. You said it better than I could.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Steve in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, you brought up, aluminum, stuff like that. I'm kind of curious, since most of our vegetables, we have so much in tin. Do you think there's any problem, any health issues with having all these canned vegetables in tin?
Well, the cans are lined so that you're not really getting the food in contact with the metal because it would leave a metallic taste. Some of the coatings they've been using have come under question because of other issues they may have. But again, maybe we all ought to go back to those, little preservation glass jars. We know that glass is a safe food storage material compared to metals and plastics. And maybe we should just go back to insisting on glass jars for things.
Okay. Hey, thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Now, apparently, the Maryland Attorney General is now on the warpath against a nursing home operator, Niswonger Management Services, for basically kicking out patients and taking new patients in to secure and boost the Medicare payments because there were reimbursement differences between the federal Medicare and the lesser rates paid by Medicaid. And so in order to maximize profits, they were simply kicking out people who were on the lower reimbursement to make room for people on the higher reimbursement. And it's another reminder that the medical industrial complex is not concerned with your health. They're concerned with making money. This goes all the way back to Richard Nixon, when there was this push to corporatize medicine and make a profit center out of it in order to generate tax revenues. That's where all the HMOs came in, and medical care became more about making money and less about actually taking care of people. Now, we're getting another booga-booga warning saying that experts, who are remaining anonymous, warn the entire global internet could go down for 24 hours as cyber criminals ramp up their attacks. Now, we have talked before in the past. We know how much certain elements of our government want to get a hot war going with Russia and China and so forth. And we have talked before about the concept of a virtual 9/11. Because airplanes into buildings, been there, done that, didn't buy the T-shirt. But we could see, it's within the realm of possibility that our government could deliberately crash the internet and blame it on those evil Russian hackers and say, that's it, we're declaring war. It could be that simple. And that may be the reason they're still pushing Russian hacker, Russian hacker, Russian hacker so hard in the corporate media, even though there's no proof it took place, even though Julian Assange is saying the Russians were not the source of the DNC emails, even though the former UK ambassador is saying he was on the pipeline of getting these leaked DNC emails and they were delivered on flash drive. Despite all of that contrary evidence, the corporate media is still out there. Russia's hacking, Russia's hacking, Russia's hacking Ukraine's power system. Russia is hacking the phone calls of that guy in the New England Patriots team. And they're that's the meme. They're pushing it as hard as they can. And what they may be doing is pre-selling the villain for a takedown of the entire internet, which would force us all to go back to watching our cable TV news channels to find out what the heck is going on. And as I said before, I'm very concerned both about Christmas this Sunday and New Year's the week later as highly symbolic targets, which they like to use. But we do need to remember it could actually happen. Now then, if you are my age, you will remember how a while back, two gentlemen named Fleischman and Pons came up with a very weird experiment that seemed to be generating energy from what amounted to an electrolysis process. And they jumped to the conclusion that they were achieving nuclear fusion at room temperature. This in contrast with other approaches to fusion power like the tokamak reactors, which require tremendously high pressures and temperatures. And as we mentioned last week, South Korea has achieved a stable fusion plasma lasting more than a minute, which means they're within sight of the finish line of hot fusion as a reliable source of electric power. Then scientists came on out and said, no, it's not cold fusion, there's nothing there. Somebody bought up all the patents, though, and their university got a huge grant, and we have been hearing that the U.S. military laboratories are still playing around with this, and they're getting results. And so now we're seeing this article that came out of Scientific American, basically saying that it was wrong to call it cold fusion, but we shouldn't have put it down. there is something going on. And they're not sure what it is, but when followed correctly, they are in fact getting a system where they're getting more energy out than energy going on in. And they're now starting to look at something called the Widom-Larsen theory, which involves localized conversion of gamma radiation to infrared, which is why there's no radioactivity coming on out, and no heavy shielding. And they're now acknowledging, yeah, there might actually be something there. It's still a laboratory curiosity, but it could potentially become a new energy source without any of the toxic effects of fission power, make us all less dependent on petroleum. But there's definitely something there. And I don't know about you, but I love the idea that we live in a world where it's still possible to discover new and amazing things. I don't think the human race knows everything there is to know. I think 1,000 years from now, they'll be looking back and saying, we're the Dark Ages in terms of our knowledge. Oh, they actually believed in a Big Bang. Those silly primitives back then. Now, speaking of curiosity, as you know, I'm a big space buff, and we've been hearing about they've had a problem with the Curiosity rover, and I went in, I did a little more reading about it, and it has to do with that large arm that has all the drill and sampling instruments on it. And as it turns out, the drill is not actually stuck. The problem is the motor that brings the arm back in keeps disengaging. My guess is there could be some debris, dust buildup, who knows. But they can't really drive the rover with that arm extended out because it's very unstable. It's going to bounce around and possibly damage the instrumentation. So at the moment, Curiosity is sitting at the exact same place while they try and debug this arm. It's not like they could fly up there and repair the unit. It is capable of moving, and hopefully they're going to solve this and continue to move forward. But space is our environment, and anybody who thinks otherwise is a fool. Apparently, China has now demonstrated their fuelless drive system on their Tiangong 2 space station, if I got the name correctly on that. So there's some exciting developments on out there. We need to get back into the space game in a big way. We need a technology incubator to create new technologies on which to base new industries, new products. We'll be back with the last segment of our show today. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the last segment of our program today. And just a quick reminder, I'm actually going to be taking over the microphone for John Stadmiller for the 2 hours following this show. John is a bit under the weather. And we certainly wish him get well quick, because I prefer to stick to my own show. And we miss you, John. Get back here. Meanwhile, we're getting our first look at Sukhoi's latest stealth jet, the T-50. This is their latest weapon. It is more maneuverable than the F-35. It can fly at a 30% higher speed with a range 2,000 miles farther. It will sell for $50 million per unit compared to the F-35's cost of $135 million per unit. So guess which plane other nations are going to want to buy? The American defense contractors design and build weapons to make lots of money for themselves. Russia and China have a different approach. We want a weapon that will really work. And we got to see how well they work in Syria. This country is not ready to go head-to-head with another major world power. Putin may not be entirely off base in saying Russia's military is the strongest in the world. They have committed fighters. They've got very inexpensive, superior weapons. And remember what I told you the other day. When it comes down to an outright war, the country that runs out of money first loses. And that's what's going on here. Apparently down in Melbourne, Australia, police have thwarted a planned Christmas Day terror plot that was aimed at the Flinders Street Station and Federation Square. So this reinforces what I was saying before, our concern over the symbolic importance of Christmas, that we need to be on our guard here for terror attacks, either real or more probably false flag. Because we know the war hawks are not giving up on their dream of a war with Russia. And if they can't get it in Syria, then they're going to push it through in Ukraine, or they're going to stage a false flag shutdown of the Internet, claim it's all Russia's fault, and launch it from there. They're desperate. They're cornered. They're looking at all those potential millions of dollars slipping from their grasp. And they're not at all happy about that one tiny bit. Okay, let's see. Getting on back here. Already talked about that. NASA has just released images of Pandora, not the one from Avatar, but it's Saturn's mini-moon, is also called Pandora. That may have been where Jim Cameron got the inspiration there. But they've released those pictures. Now that Cassini is getting to the end of its mission, they're willing to take more risks with it, move it closer to the rings, and so forth. I remember that probe that they sent to the asteroid, that when the mission was over, instead of just abandoning it, they literally sent it in for a soft landing. It wasn't designed to soft land, but they put it down on the asteroid and they got signals back from it. There's the music. Time for me to head on out of here. Like I said, I'm going to be back in a couple of minutes here with John Stedmiller's show. We'll talk to you otherwise tomorrow. Aloha, America.